Suicide has touched my family in 2008 when my middle brother, Aidan, passed away by suicide, and he was only 19 years of age at the time. So after Aidan passed away, as many people do, you look for sort of a sense of hope, you look for a meaning and a purpose. So I created a Facebook memorial page, as I'm sure many people do, called the Aidan Project, and that was originally started to help family and friends deal with what had happened, communicate, sort of speak to each other about what they might have been going through, and then it grew from there. We had no idea what was going on, what that ripple effect would be, who we needed to talk to, who would have some insight into what we were going through. So we created it ourselves. We created a little community amongst ourselves. And hopefully that is changing, and I think it is changing. But initially that was extremely important for my friends and family. It gave us an opportunity to celebrate Aidan's life and not just focus on the mourning of what had happened. My advice for people wanting to get involved and wanting to get involved and have that sense of purpose is to link up with other individuals who maybe have gone through a similar thing or might have an understanding of the sector already. So volunteering for those organisations, the Lifelines, the Beyond Blues, there are some amazing organisations in local communities, and I think that is really important because you get a sense of what's already there.
Everyone can make a difference in suicide prevention. You don't have to be a health professional, and in fact we know what works best in our local communities, so every single one of us needs to have a voice in suicide prevention. That might be a business voice, councils, schools, P&Cs, or people with lived experience, so people who have cared for someone who's been suicidal, someone who's attempted previously, people who've been through the health system and know what works and what doesn't. We want to hear that and make that voice be heard in suicide prevention programs so that they can be better for future generations.
So if you've been touched by suicide, I would recommend getting in touch with SPA. They've just launched their new Lived Experience Network, and it is an amazing community of people who all have a lived experience of suicide. So I wish this was around when I was going through what I was going through, because it meant that I would have access to information about events that were coming up, how I could get involved. It does a lot of the hard legwork for you.
One of the ways you can share your experience and something you think has worked or could work better in suicide prevention is to visit communitiesmatter.com.au and add your story to the list of examples there. Lots of other communities have shared their plans, their stories, what's worked well for them, and you can learn from each other and add your story to the mix. One thing people from our Lived Experience Network have told us is that they've been really passionate about getting involved in suicide prevention, but when they've had a good look at where they are personally and emotionally in their experience, they're not really ready to get involved in front-facing suicide prevention as much as they want to make a difference. So what I would say is have a think about your personal readiness and how you take care of yourself emotionally before you go headlong into suicide prevention activities. That said, there will always be things to do in the background. If you're not comfortable standing up publicly and talking in public about your experience, there will be other ways you contribute. Maybe you could join a suicide prevention network and help them out with some of their administration or behind the scenes jobs. There will always be a way you can make a difference depending on how ready you feel.
The one thing that I found really challenging in the beginning was because I wasn't employed or associated directly with a reputable mental health organisation, it was really hard to get your voice heard. So as a person with lived experience, we have so much insight, and I think that's really valuable, and that's what's exciting about the Lived Experience Network through Suicide Prevention Australia is those voices are going to be taken seriously, and we don't need to have a big organisation backing us for people to take us seriously.
Something we've learned from suicide prevention networks involved in the Communities Matter project is that a lot of communities fail because they don't have a succession plan for a committee. It sounds really boring, but you need to focus on some of that stuff that keeps a bit of momentum going, because we all come to it with a lot of passion and drive. But if someone leaves that's driving that committee, what happens next? So things tend to fall over when they don't have a structure around it and plans for succession and how to keep that group going. My number one tip for someone starting out in suicide prevention and wanting to make a difference is get yourself to a training session to learn how to speak about suicide or do suicide first aid. I found that extremely helpful. It gave me an understanding of how I should speak about suicide that's not going to damage myself or other people, and just gave me a more confidence in working in this area.
I think the one piece of advice I would have for people is take your time. When I started the Aiden project, I wanted it to change the world, and I didn't want anyone else to go through what my family and I had gone through. And I think, speaking to people, it's important that things will happen. You put in the hard work, you do the hard yards, you link up with amazing individuals, and it will happen. It's just about taking baby steps, which I think is really important.
One of the best lessons that we've learned is that try and work with existing charities and organisations in your area that are attempting to achieve the same goal as you. Rather than reinventing the wheel, let's harness the energy that you've got and apply that to an existing structure or organisation, rather than starting another charity to add to the mix.
So the Aiden project has morphed into lots of different things over the past 7 years. Initially, again, I used to describe it as a communication tool. So it was purely filtering down information from all the big organisations like Lifeline, Beyond Blue. I just kind of filtered that information through because I know with a lot of my brother's friends, they were young 19-year-old boys. They weren't really open to looking on the Lifeline pages and those type of things. So it was like a safe environment for them to access information without acknowledging maybe that they were accessing information. I think the most fulfilling thing is when you just randomly maybe get a message from someone saying, I really appreciate what you're doing, and you don't do it for thanks, and we don't do it for the kudos that we think that we're going to get. We put in all this hard work and we give up our time and our experiences, but you don't do it for thanks. So that's sometimes really nice to just get a little message from someone saying what you're doing is really important. That validation, sometimes I think we don't realise that we do need it. So that's really good.